In this video, I'll be sharing with you a requested tutorial from my group on how to cut this stylish ruched shoulder underbust basque dress with gathers. So this dress is from Stitches by IC. So for this pattern, the first thing you need to note is the length of this dress. So now, to cut this dress, you have to get your waist to, your shoulder to waist point, which is what I have here. Now, after my waistline, I added basque of 4 inches. So this basque is not included in the length of the dress. The basque is just an extension you're going to add in front of this dress. So here's the underbust and here is the bust line. So now, first thing you need to do is to get the total length of the dress you're working with, and then you're going to minus your shoulder to waist out of the pattern. So let's say the total length of this dress is 60 inches. So you're going to minus your shoulder to waist. My shoulder to waist is 17 inches minus, you take that's 17 inches. Now you do 60 inches, which is the full length of your dress, minus 17. So for me, what I will have left for the lower part is 43 inches. So that 43 inches, you're going to cut it in form of a gathers. So you need about 3 yards by 43 inches. Now you're going to add extra 2 inches to the length of the lower part of this dress, because you're going to fold the lower part. So what I'll now cut is 45 inches by 3 yards, which I'll use to gather the lower part of this dress. Now, another thing is that since there's a basque at the front part of this dress might be longer, so you can go ahead to trim that part out when you're making the dress. That is, after making the dress, you can just trim out the longer area of the dress and fold it up. So without much wasting time, let's go ahead to draft the upper part. So here I'll mark my shoulder divided by 2 and I will come down by 1 inch. After marking this, I'll go ahead and mark a basic neckline of 3 inches for this pattern. 3 inches for the neckline. And the next step I'll take is to go ahead to place my pattern, and I'm going to place my ruler and I'll connect to the neckline. So I'll find my chest line, which is my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, giving me 7 inches. I'll place my ruler and I will draw out a straight line. So note, you might not be needing or using this, but we are just marking it out as a guide. So I'll go ahead to mark my shoulder divided by 2. Now I'm going to connect from here to here. Now another thing you need to do is the extension, the length of your sleeve, right? How long you want your sleeve to be. So I'll just be using what I have on the pattern paper, but from what we have, you should use at least 7 inches to 10 inches for the extension. Although whatever you have here, you're going to use a slash and spread method on it to get that fuller shoulder effect, which you're going to add an elastic to the shoulder to create the ruched shoulder effect. Now from this point, I'll come down by 1 inch. Now I'll now reconnect it back to the neckline of this dress. So this is now my new shoulder slope. Now let's go ahead and insert our measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference, which is 33 divided by 4, and I'll add my sewing allowance of 1.5 inches. So this allowance is not a standard. You can go ahead to use what is okay for you. Now I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4 and I'll add my sewing allowance. I'll mark my waist circumference, which is the same thing as my underbust, which is 28 inches divided by 4. I have 7 inches and I'll add my sewing allowance of 1.5. So now I'll go ahead to place my ruler and I'm going to connect this from the bust to the underbust and down to the waistline. So for the basque of this dress, it is not so deep. So what I'll do is to come in by my sewing allowance that I have here. This is because the waistline of the back and the front should be meeting each other. Now I'll come down by 4 inches, which I've already marked on my pattern. So the next step I'll take is just to go ahead to connect for my basque. Now, when you're also drafting out this pattern, you can use the front pattern to achieve the back. The only difference is that you're going to add a zipper because the lower part is just a gathers, and the neckline of this dress is a bit high. So I'll be using about 3 inches by 2.5 inches. Now, the only difference for the back pattern is that the neckline will be 3 inches by 1.5 inches. Now, I'll go ahead to connect. So if you're using your front pattern to cut out the back pattern, all you have to do is just to go ahead to add a zipper at the front part, that is for the back pattern, and then increase the neckline to 3 by 1.5 inches with your pattern. So this pattern, we are actually going to place it on another pattern paper and we're going to draft it out. So from here, I'm just going to connect this all the way down, and I'll connect it. You can go ahead to measure how open you want your sleeve to be, which could be around 8 to 10 inches depending on what you want. So I'm just going to use between 9 inches here, and I will reconnect it down to my underbust this way. So this is what my pattern will look like. So let's go ahead to cut this out. Now on this dress, you notice that we have a cut at the underbust. So what am I going to do now is just to go ahead to cut this out. So now this is the basque area. Now if you're going to use your pattern to cut this, for the back pattern, what you do is to go ahead to fold this up and then add your zipper in front of it. That is, after using this pattern to cut out the front, fold out the basque area of this dress and then add your zipper to the back, a zipper of 1.5 to 2 inches. Now for the upper part of this dress, we're going to have like a slash and spread effect on it. So you can go ahead to measure what you have here and divide it equally, and then go ahead to spread it. So what I have here is 11.5. Let's say I'm cutting this out with 2.5 inches. So I'll just go ahead to cut this out, and we're going to transfer this pattern to another pattern paper. Now you're going to slash and spread and then have or add an elastic to the shoulder of your dress to create like a ruche effect on it. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So I'll go ahead to cut this out. So for this neckline area, if you're going to have issues with cutting it, you can just leave this as one pattern and then start ruching this part from the shoulder parts to avoid when you're turning it, you're going to have issue. But the thing you're going to do is you're going to use the main pattern first to cut out your lining. This main pattern, before going ahead to ruche it out, you're going to cut out the lining. Why? The lining will serve as a guide to help you know the size of the actual dress. So that after you're done ruching it, you're going to like place it on the lining of the dress. So the lining has the actual measurement of the dress. Now the main fabric will now be the part that will have the ruche, which you're going to ruche back to meet the actual length of the dress. Now I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out, and I'll be placing this measurement on another pattern paper. And remember, just like I said, the front and the back is almost the same thing. The only difference is that there's a zipper at the front, at the back pattern, which you'll be adding, let's say when you're drafting out your back pattern, and then you increase the neckline of the back. Now after slashing this, you are going to place it on another pattern paper. This is to get the ruche effect. Now depending on the space you're using, that is how much ruche you're going to have. And there are two ways to actually get this ruche. It's either you add an elastic to the shoulder of your dress, or you're going to use the actual pattern to cut out the lining, which you're going to place back the part of the fabric which you have slashed and spread to have a wider effect. Now you're going to pin it down on the actual lining and fold it back to get the actual length of this dress. Or you're just going to go ahead to turn up the neckline, bias it, and you're going to go ahead to add an elastic to the shoulder area. So just like I said, depending on the length of the or space you give for your ruche, like this pattern I'm using 2.5 inches, which is not a standard. I'm just using 2.5 inches because of the pattern paper I have available. Now if you notice, I went ahead to like follow it one after the other and I placed my pattern. Now at the armhole area or the sleeve area, you add 1 inch because you fold it back. Now we'll go ahead to trace out what I have here and follow that to the end of the sleeve. Now I'll just go ahead to cut this out. After cutting it out, just like I said, you can add an elastic to the shoulder and bias the neckline, that is, gather the neckline and bias it back, or you can cut a lining to use it to ruche it and let it serve as a guide to ruche back the upper part of this dress. Now for the lower part of the dress, you're going to gather it back. For the underbust area, you're going to gather it back to match what you have at the underbust of your dress. This same method applies to your back pattern. The only difference is that you have a zipper. So just like I said, the lower part, you now ruche it or gather it back to your underbust. So we have already discussed how to get the lower part. Now gather the lower part to form the gather's effect at the lower part of your dress.